Good morning, everyone. Let's call this meeting of the TRPA Legal Committee to order. It is Wednesday, March 26, 2025 at 8:30. Catherine, can you please call the roll for quorum?
Ms. Fastinos?
Here.
Mr. Keycumber?
Here.
Ms. Loomer? Ms. Aldine?
Here.
Ms. Williamson?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. A couple things to go over. If you're with us online, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted, or click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Anything else? Everyone's here, so I don't have to go over remote as much. Next, let's go to approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Thank you. We'll deem the agenda approved as posted. Let's move on then to agenda item 2, which is approval of the minutes. We have a draft set of minutes from December 18 on page 9 of your packet. Anyone have any changes?
No, they were brilliant. Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes
Thank you.
of December 18th, 2024 as presented.
Thank you, Shelley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. That brings us to agenda item 3. This is the Lori and John Brook et al. Appeal of approval of new cellular communications facility, County of Placer, public right of way, southwest corner of Dollar Drive and Observation Drive, Dollar Point, California, APN 093310024, TRPA project file number ERSP 2024-0264, and appeal file number admin 2024-0038. Information on this item can be found on page 181. As a reminder to the public, after staff presentation and committee discussion on this item, we'll hear public comment, and that we're going to turn over to Jack for 15 minutes from staff, please.
We're actually, Graham's gonna tee me up.
I'll just tee this up. Good morning, members of the committee and those of you joining us online, the public. I'm Graham St. Michel, General Counsel here with the agency, and I just wanted to tee up this appeal. It concerns an executive director approval carried out after a public meeting at the hearings officer public meeting to issue a permit for the construction of a telecommunications facility in the Dollar Point area. And I just really wanted to kind of acknowledge the voluminous comments that we received about, many of them very colorful, some of them kind of rude, like those comments come in. I wanted to distinguish that I think the appellants are here and we appreciate them here. Those comments weren't from them. And I think they can speak, for themselves, but many of those comments come in that they were alleging health impacts from telecommunication facilities. And those really aren't issues before us today in this appeal. We'd be happy to take questions from the board and the committee about how TRPA approaches radio frequency emissions. But I would just encourage a focus, and I'll probably make the same comments before the governing board this morning of just, it's appropriate to stay focused on the issues before presented to us today from the appellants. And I'll turn it over to Jack to cover those issues. Thanks.
Absolutely, thanks, Graham. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jack Mensick, Assistant Attorney here at TRPA. I'm here to present staff's recommendation on this matter. As Graham mentioned, this appeal involves a construction permit issued by a hearings officer via the executive director's delegated authority following a hearing on September 26, 2024. The permit authorizes the installation of new pole top cellular equipment in the Dollar Point residential area. The permittee is AT&T, and Epic Wireless Group LLC is overseeing this project on AT&T's behalf and will speak today on AT&T's behalf. The appellants are a group of homeowners in Dollar Point, and we also have TRPA permit staff here in the room to answer any questions you guys may have. Next slide. So the staff's recommendation is to deny the appeal and affirm the executive director's decision to issue this permit. I will explain why. Next slide. So appellants raised 3 main issues on appeal. First, they generally allege the TRPA failed to provide sufficient notice to the surrounding community regarding the project. Second, they argue that Epic and AT&T failed to consider suitable alternative sites for the project. And third, they argue that TRPA's visual representations of the project were inadequate, and they generally object to the visual impacts of the project. As I'll explain further, none of these arguments establish a violation of the TRPA Code of Ordinances or the TRPA Rules of Procedure that would justify grant of this appeal. First, TRPA not only met but exceeded the noticing requirements for hearings officer projects under the TRPA Rules of Procedure. Second, the record clearly demonstrates that Epic and AT&T considered alternative sites, but were unable to identify a suitable alternative location. And third, TRPA's visual representations were sufficient and TRPA staff adequately analyzed the project's visual impacts when issuing the permit. Next slide. Okay, so this slide just shows where the project is located, which is that green dot right there. The right is the Dollar Point subdivision, and to the left is Highway 28, the main thoroughfare along the North Shore. Next slide. So this is just a close-up of the project site. You can see it's right next to a recreation facility that is owned and managed by the Dollar Point Association. A quick note on the Dollar Point Association, it is not an HOA. It is a voluntary association that homeowners in the Dollar Point community may join for a fee in exchange to access to the association's recreation facilities, such as this pool and tennis courts, and I believe there's gym seen here. Next slide. So this is what the project site currently looks like. AT&T maintains a utility pole, which you can see here, as well as cabinets. Next slide. And so this is what the project looks like as it was approved at the hearings officer in meeting in September. So the project would replace the existing pole with a 52-foot wooden pole with cellular equipment mounted on top. The applicants don't plan to install any new ground equipment. There's no new additional site coverage. The new pole will be bored. It won't be dug using open trenching, and it will involve only a minor amount of soil displacement. I also note that, so the applicant describes this project as a microcell site, like rather than a proper cell tower, because its purpose is to improve cellular coverage in the Dollar Point community, which AT&T has identified as being spotty and unreliable, rather than providing cell service to like a broader area. And then also, I note that it's not a monopine, it won't have, it's not like a fake tree with fake plastic needles, so it won't raise any of those concerns. And lastly, I also note that TRPA has approved other microcell sites in various parts of the Tahoe Basin over the past few years. Some folks here might have one in their neighborhood. And the agency prefers to locate these next to private residences, or prefers not to locate these next to private residences whenever possible. Next slide. So this is just another view. You can note that the new pole will be surrounded by trees, but it won't rise above the tree canopy. Next slide. And this is just another view that AT&T provided. I would also note that there is already quite a bit of utility poles and overhead utility lines in the Dollar Point community. All right, next slide. And then after appellants filed their appeal, Epic tried to work with the appellants and AT&T to come up with some additional visual mitigation measures, which you can see here. So you might be able to tell that like the antennas are slightly smaller than the previous photos I just showed you. And AT&T has also agreed to put in these camouflage wraps around the antennas. Again, these would not involve any monopine fake needles. They're just like printed pictures. These new alterations would not require additional TRPA project approval, like they wouldn't have to submit a new project application. But we will be kept in the loop about whatever, camouflage option they end up choosing. Next slide. Okay, so the first set of arguments pertains to the sufficiency of the TRPA notice slide. And the applicable rule here is Rule of Procedure 14.4, which governs public notice of projects coming before a TRPA hearings officer. Rule 14.4 requires TRPA to give notice of the project by mail to owners of property located within 300 feet of a project site. The agency has to mail notice no later than 14 calendar days before the hearing. Here, TRPA not only met, but exceeded Rule 14.4 by sending notice to property owners within a quarter mile of the project site, as we have done for similar projects in the past. Attachment F of the staff report includes the list of roughly 300 property owners to whom TRPA notice. Notice was also mailed timely on September 12th, 2024, 2 weeks before the hearing date. A copy of the mailed notice form is included at attachment G of the staff report. Next slide. So this is just a rough illustration that I made of what the notice radius looks like. So the red circle is the 300-foot radius of the project site where TRPA rules require us to send notice, and the blue circle is the quarter mile radius to which we actually did send notice. So you can see that the radius to which we sent notice was quite a bit larger. Next slide. Okay, so appellant's first argument is that notice was insufficient in scope under the circumstances. Basically, because the project is adjacent to the Dollar Point Association facility and the Dollar Point entrance, they believe that notice should either have been sent to association members or to the entire community of 531 homes. But again, TRPA is only required under our rules to give notice to properties within 300 feet of a project, and the agency went above and beyond that requirement here. And I also note that when a property owner happens to be an organization like a church, a school, a gym, or a recreation facility, as seen here, there's nothing in our rules that requires us to, on our own accord, go and find out who the members are and go notice them ourselves. I think clearly that burden has to fall on the organization, and that's what happened here. We sent notice to the Dollar Point Association, and the Dollar Point Association in turn forwarded that notice to its members. Thus, this argument with respect to notice fails to identify a violation of the TRPA code or the TRPA rules of procedure and does not present a basis for granting the appeal. Next slide. Additionally, appellants object to the fact that the hearings officer did not grant them a 30-day extension or continuance to notice neighbors, but the hearings officer appropriately determined that there was no good cause for a continuance pursuant to Rule 14.5 because TRPA notice requirements had been satisfied and exceeded. And then also some appellants claim they never received notice in the mail, but TRPA rules provide that notice is effective upon the date of deposit in the mail. This rule is consistent with federal case law pertaining to notice and due process. And federal case law also indicates that actual notice of a project through other means, like hearing about it from a neighbor or a Facebook post, satisfies due process. Next slide, please. So the second set of arguments is about consideration of alternative sites. Next slide. So appellants argue that TRPA and the permittee did not sufficiently consider alternative sites for the project. The record, however, clearly demonstrates otherwise. Although not in the code or rules, TRPA requires as a matter of practice that applications for transmission and receiving facilities include an alternative site analysis describing all other options considered for the facility. Here, the permittee submitted an alternative site analysis as part of their application, and that's included at attachment H to the staff report. Next slide. So here's what their alternative site analysis found. They considered 3 nearby alternative sites, but none of them were ultimately feasible for various reasons. First was the Dollar Creek Trailhead across Highway 28. But Placer County was not agreeable to a cell site on the parcel. Second was a site located along Highway 28, but this site had the potential to detrimentally impact TRPA scenic thresholds. And third was a co-location with Verizon at a nearby fire station. But the applicant determined this location would be too far away to meet the project goals of improving coverage in Dollar Point. At the hearing, the hearings officer asked the permittee about their alternative analysis multiple times, and the permittee explained why each site wouldn't work. The hearings officer was satisfied and approved the project. Slide. And then after the appeal was filed, as demonstrated at attachment E of the staff report, Epic worked further with the appellants and AT&T to come up with an agreeable alternative site. The parties explored another AT&T owned utility pole across the street, but this would place the project directly adjacent to a private residence. And it would not have done anything to improve the visual impact of the project. And so therefore, the record demonstrates that AT&T considered at least 4 alternative sites for the project and has sufficiently demonstrated that each alternative is not feasible. Next slide. So the last set of arguments pertains to visual representations of the project. Next slide. And appellant's visual objections are multifold. First, they argue that the notice form did not include project visuals. But Rule 14.4 only requires notice to state the date, time, and place of the hearing and indicate that there will be an opportunity to be heard. That rule is consistent with federal case law pertaining to notice. Moreover, the notice form that we mailed described the project and indicated that a staff summary, which included visuals, would be posted online for public review prior to the hearing, which it was. Thus, the public had an opportunity to review project visuals prior to the hearing. And second, appellants object to the fact that the visuals did not represent views of the project from the association's pool deck. However, TRPA does not protect private views. Next slide. And finally, appellants contend that the mitigation measures seem insufficient to reduce the pole's visibility or ensure it blends with the surrounding area. This argument was a bit unclear to me, but I will say that TRPA staff analyzed visual impacts under 2 separate code provisions. First, staff scenic quality analysis concluded that there would be no adverse effect to the scenic threshold rating in the applicable roadway unit along Highway 28. And second, staff was required to make special use findings under Chapter 21, which included findings pertaining to neighborhood compatibility. Staff determined that the project was consistent with the area plan and the regional plan, which allow for transmission and receiving facilities at this location. Staff determined that the color of the pole and the surrounding trees would help the pole blend in. They determined that the project would not produce any noise. And they determined that a location next to a recreation facility made this more compatible than siting it next to a private residence. Next slide. And again, AT&T agreed mitigation measures, the smaller antennas and the camouflage wraps. So while it's sufficient, this does not present an adequate basis to find that TRPA's scenic quality or special use findings were erroneous. Next slide. Then lastly, we also note that there are some issues with the relief that appellants seek. The appellants essentially asked for more time to solicit further public comment and consider more alternative locations. But as I've explained, the permittee has already considered alternative locations with no success, and it's not clear that further evaluation would be fruitful. And this appeal has already given appellants 6 months to solicit public comment from neighbors. And it's not clear what more time would accomplish. Slide. So in sum, we conclude that appellants have not demonstrated that the executive director granted this permit contrary to TRPA rules or applicable law, and we recommend that the board deny the appeal. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Now I'd like to turn it over to Lori or John Brook to present for the appellants for 15 minutes, please.
This is Todd Schneider. I'm resident of 163 Round Ridge, within the half-mile radius, and I'll be doing the presentation today.
Thanks, Todd. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Great. First of all, good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I want to start by making clear that while there were many public comments, as staff noted, we're not opposed. The appellants are not opposed to improving cellular coverage in Dollar Point. We're not here to talk about health issues. We're really here to ask for a more thoughtful and inclusive process, one that ensures the infrastructure is placed in a way that respects the community character and is consistent with TRPA's values of environmental sensitivity and visual integrity. This isn't just about a cell tower. It's about placing a 52-foot commercial tower at the main entrance to a long-standing family neighborhood adjacent to one of our most visited community spaces. The proposed cell tower location is in the middle of where we walk with our kids, gather with our neighbors, and welcome visitors. It's a symbolic and visual gateway into Dollar Point, and a prominent placement of the tower would permanently alter the feel and identity of the community that we all cherish. As the staff mentioned, we have various issues with the notice process. First, we believe that notice was inadequate. Staff cited to Rule 14.4 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances. 14.4 reads that all projects or matters reviewed by the governing board shall require notice to affected property owners. Said the proponent of the project or matter shall submit a list to TRPA of the names and addresses of person who own property or a portion thereof, and then goes on to talk about a 300-foot radius. Our reading of that provision is that the 300-foot radius is a minimum. It is not necessarily inclusive of all effective property owners, and that's really the only way to read that rule. If one were to read the rule that you only had to provide notice within 300 feet, then the notes affected property owners and persons who own property or a portion thereof would be surplus. And it is axiomatic that when reading statutes or codes, that one must give effect to all words, not just some words. So we disagree with the reading that 300 feet was enough, or even that the quarter mile was enough. If you look at the radius that was shown by staff, you'll note that it encompassed a lot of people across the highway and not all Dollar Point homeowners. Of course, most Dollar Point homeowners pay into the Dollar Point Association and therefore own a portion of that property and should receive notice. The inadequate notice mischaracterized the community support for this location. Once we, through Dollar Point Association, once the appellants through Dollar Point Association got notice out, the volume of comments went through the roof. Some of those comments are from the EMF crowd. Some of those comments are from homeowners that, like us, are worried about the visual impact. The point is that those comments did not come in until adequate notice went out. And so unless and until TRPA considers the feedback of all affected homeowners per its own rule, the approval should not be allowed to stand. The denial of the extension request wasn't just a denial of an extension request. What it was a denial of a request to improve notice and make notice comply with the rules. So there's only one way to comply with the rule, and that is to give notice to all affected homeowners and all homeowners that have even a partial ownership interest in the property. The DPA, as staff mentioned, is not a formal homeowners association and does not represent all property owners. A personal letter from the DPA president was misread by staff as official support. It was not official support. I've got a copy of the letter on the screen here. And you'll see that Paul Nelson, while he was the the president of DPA, wrote in his individual capacity. Yet this was wrongly described as the HOA not having any objections. If in fact, Dollar Point Association has a policy of staying neutral on land use issues and could not have commented on behalf of the homeowners. Members weren't consulted or notified by DPA, and there was no consensus. It was simply a communication failure. So again, the 30-day was not a request for more time for the sole purpose of giving more time. It was more time to correct the notice, which is relevant to today's discussion. I want to go now to the second issue, which is the limited site evaluation and no serious effort to explore alternative sites. It seems that AT&T and Epic simply looked for the site with the least possibility for any kind of uproar, and they went about a notice process that did exactly that. During the hearing, only one alternative site was briefly mentioned, but it had already been ruled out in a previous review. There was no presentation of new or creative alternatives and no outreach to the community to brainstorm better locations. We believe the current site was selected because, again, it was the path of least resistance, not because it was the most responsible or appropriate option. And dismissal of alternatives due to corporate reluctance to refile is simply not acceptable. We urge TPA to consider a site within the Dollar Creek Crossing development, a newer, better area suited for infrastructure planning. This would accommodate the facility with far less visual and communal disruption. The tower doesn't need to be wedged into our neighborhood's front yard. We can and should do better. If TPA is simply checking boxes to approve this, that is contrary to TRPA's mandate. The tower site is just 45 feet from our community pool and within a sight line of our playground, tennis courts, and family gathering space. This is a shared, cherished space used daily, particularly in the summertime, by families, retirees, renters, and guests. It's an essential part of what makes Dollar Point special. And yet the collective owners of that space, all 500 plus homeowners, were not individually notified in direct contravention of 14.5 of TRPA's rules. This would never be acceptable if the tower were proposed beside any other major or public communal asset. Placement and size of the cell tower creates a dominating presence, and we believe this oversight alone justifies reconsideration. The visual impact of the tower was buried in the TRPA report on page 49 of a 54-page PDF that required several clicks to go deep into the TRPA website. No visuals were included in the mail notice. The rendering only showed views from the street, not from the pool deck, the play area, or any other location where people actually gather. The tower's height exceeds its setback from the pool. Its antennas will overhang the pool area, and in the unlikely event of a collapse, they could fall directly into the pool. The lack of visual representation made it difficult for residents to understand what was being proposed, and those who did find the visuals were shocked. This is not a low-profile installation, but highly visible in the most socially active and scenic part of our neighborhood. Since the hearing, we've taken it upon ourselves as residents to do the outreach that never happened. We created a community survey and petition to give neighbors a voice and raise awareness. While the Dollar Point Association did not take a position on the tower itself, they did help by circulating our materials, and we appreciate their support. The responses speak volumes. 89% of residents said they had not seen a visual rendering of the tower before our outreach, underscoring the inadequacy of notice. even though the approving hearing had already taken place. Once informed, 73% said they opposed this location for the tower. In addition to the survey, we collected over 49 petition signatures from residents who opposed the proposed site. And beyond that, many individuals have submitted personal letters directly to TRPA, each voicing thoughtful concerns and asking for reconsideration. This is not a few isolated voices. It's a growing, informed community response that was simply missing from the original record because of inadequate and illegal notice. Once people understood the full context, location, height, and visual impact, they cared deeply and spoke clearly. This is exactly why we're asking for a pause and for reconsideration. In closing, we ask TRPA to consider what this tower represents, not just a structure, but a signal, quite literally, about how planning decisions are made. And importantly, we are not saying no. We're working proactively with Epic Wireless to find a better location. Our goal is coverage without compromising community character. We urge you to pause the approval, extend the process, and give the full committee a voice in the outcome. Let's work together to find a location that serves the public without compromising the heart of Dollar Point. In short, this is a fixable situation, and we can find a solution. We just need all of the parties to work together to do so. Thank you for your time, and of course, we welcome any questions.
Thank you, Todd. Next, we will take committee questions, but next I'm going to turn this over to Epic Wireless, the representative, for 15 minutes, please.
I assume you want me to sit here, folks?
Please come on up.
Okay. Well, good morning. My name is Mark Lobaugh. I'm with Epic Wireless here on behalf of AT&T. I was the applicant, been on this project since the get-go, working with TRPA on this installation in this project. You can roll the next slide, please. So I want to go over a couple of reasons for selecting the proposed location, and start off by, first of all, stating that AT&T owns the pole that we're co-locating, proposing this co-location. It's currently used as a landline pole. And we always try to utilize existing structures whenever we're siting these locations. I mean, that's always the first alternative. If we can find an existing cell tower, all the better. In this case, there isn't any other cell towers in the area that we could co-locate on. So there's various reasons why we selected this particular area or this particular location. This location will correct a significant coverage gap in the area and provide reliable wireless services to hundreds of homes and businesses and travelers. We've identified this over the last several years as being a very underserved area. This will correct that. The proposed reuse of an existing site provides much less visual impact than constructing a new tower. You've all seen the trees, the fake trees and so forth around the lake. This site is arguably much less visually impactful than constructing a new facility. Other sites could potentially impact lake views, be located near public trails, and conflict with other TRPA siting requirements. Putting a site up here, a cell site, I've done dozens of sites over here up in the basins over the last 15 years. They're not easy. There's no great location for a cell site up here. So we really try hard to utilize existing facilities, and this site gets us there. The proposed pole is not located directly in front of a residence versus I incorrectly stated HOA facility. It's not technically an HOA facility. So we're not in front of a direct line of sight in front of a residence, and they're directly adjacent to a residence, I should say. The proposed site will not require new TRPA site coverage mitigations due to the reuse of the existing cabinets and with no ground disturbance. AT&T has the legal standing to place cellular equipment on poles located in the public right-of-way. The proposed area already has extensive existing overhead infrastructure. If you look at the photos, there's wires and poles all over the place at this intersection. Other macro site alternatives were explored but not selected, as this information was included in the original submittal materials to TRPA. There's scenic impact issues, trailhead issues, all sorts of issues. There were no rooftops, there were no other cell sites to go on. We're highly limited, constricted as to where we could potentially locate a site. Next slide, please. I reached out to the appellant once the appeal was filed, and we met, basically stood on this exact location. And the appellant was requesting that we would consider the arrow and blue pole. That's also an AT&T owned pole. It should be pointed out that not all poles in the area are owned by AT&T. There's only, I think, 3 or 4 poles here that are owned by AT&T. The rest are owned by the local utility. That's an important distinction. So the blue pole was, the appellant was requested by the appellant for us to consider. We just didn't feel that it provided any enhancement to visual, lessen visual impacts of the site. In addition, the blue pole, the blue arrow, is located directly in front of a residence, whereas the proposed pole in pink is, as you know, not in front of a residence. Also, you'll notice all the other infrastructure overhead items in place here. Next slide, please. Another request by the appellant was that we could potentially move this pole to a less visually impactful location at this corner. Unfortunately, we would have had to remove trees, and you can't quite, this photo doesn't quite do justice to the fact that there's at least 2 other power lines directly in back of or to the side of the existing pole. And we couldn't move the pole in that direction because it would become even closer to those poles and even closer to the common area facilities. So this just wasn't an option. Next slide, please. As a mitigation measure, we proposed a couple visual mitigations to assist with lessening the visual impact of the site. On the left is the original design that's approved by TRPA, and it has 6-foot antennas. On the right, we shrunk the antennas to 4-foot antennas, so that's a third smaller antenna. That's as small as you can get. There are no smaller antennas. A typical macro site would use 8-foot antennas. We're half the size of a typical macro site. This definitely affects the performance of the site, but we're willing to do that if it helps out here. In addition, we attempted to stealth the antennas or screen, camouflage, whatever term you want to use, the antennas. The typical methodology for that is to deploy socks, which are essentially bags with needles on them that you wrap the antennas with. They're plastic, and TRPA has made the decision they don't want plastics making their way into the lake, and as such, they've said no to the utilization of socks. The next alternative we came up with were these wraps, and essentially you take a high definition photo of the surrounding foliage and then print them on these wraps, which are appliques basically, and applied to the antennas. And I think we've dramatically decreased the visibility of the site by doing such. Next slide, please. Here's some examples of the wraps, and these were shown by staff earlier. We'll work with staff to pick out whatever we feel is the best alternative here, but different examples. Next slide. It's important to note that we're reutilizing existing cabinets. So the AT&T landline facility currently deploys 2 cabinets. They're going to consolidate into 1 cabinet, leaving the cellular use to occupy the other vacant cabinet. This is a great home run for the site. We don't have any more land or ground disturbance, no mitigations required. It's really a great and very rare opportunity to utilize existing facilities in the area. Next slide, please. So I'll leave you with the benefits of new cellular installation. It's going to provide enhanced indoor coverage and capacity. This area really experiences extremely heavy use during the summer, as you all tourist season, everybody occupies those homes up there, and it's definitely impacted right now. It'll improve broadband and cellular service for residents, travelers, and businesses in the area. Very importantly, it'll provide FirstNet coverage, which is a dedicated band, dedicated to first responders who rely on that. And it'll provide a reliable backup to traditional landline telephone service in the area in the event of power outages. So I'm hopeful that I've answered the questions that you may have. If you have other questions, I'd like to make myself available to answer those.
Thank you very much. Before we go to questions, I do want to give Lori or John or Todd the ability for any rebuttal you have for 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll go ahead and chime in on a couple of things. This is Lori Brooke. Thank you again for your time to put this together. Comment on first the radius. You know, granted, it was appropriate that they extend the radius beyond the 300 feet to a quarter mile, but when you look at that, it doesn't. A lot of it goes across the highway, you know, to other communities that will, of course, benefit from the cell coverage, but are not. John, I think that are not within. Sorry, I think we're having reverb. That are not within the and not expanding further down the hill to capture more of the Dollar Point residents, which is the point we're trying to make here. As you know, one of the lead appellants here in my effort to notify folks about this, most everyone was pretty shocked that this was going in at that particular location. As we stated earlier, we're not against improving the cell coverage in the area, but not at the cost of placement where they've chosen it. If you've been over to the Dollar Point community and you've driven in, that is the main entrance. And this will be the very first physical structure you will see. It is not tucked in, you know, somewhere that you would take a while to find it. So it's like, it, in our mind, is a very inappropriate location for this facility. We don't know why they won't further consider the Placer County area across the street, as there will be I know there's a new proposed development over there, so they're going to need better coverage also, but this should be part of that effort. And that would make a lot more sense. You could be placing it to benefit that new community, our existing community, but done in a way ahead, beforehand that isn't so disruptive. And let's see what other comments ahead. And you made several references to the fact that this won't be near homes. It's near homes. It's right at the intersections. There's homes all around there. So yes, it is adjacent to the pool, which people are at all summer, but it's also still very close to homes. And across the street, the highway, there are no homes over there. So I don't know why we cannot work harder to find a better location that serves the community, but isn't so disruptive. So those are my comments now. Todd, if you have any more. He's on mute. Todd,
Sorry,
go
I'm
ahead.
mute. None for me. I think Lori covered it. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. All right, with that then, I'm going to go to our committee members. Committee members, questions or comments?
Madam Chair, Jack, could you bring back the site photos, the first group of site photos, or Catherine?
Yeah. Which photo?
The first ones you show, they were elongated prior to that, Catherine. Yeah, the power line that we see on the right-hand side, is that visible from the pool? I guess I'm asking.
All of the power lines are visible from the pool.
All the power lines are visible from the pool. Okay, so I mean, that is scenic degradation as well. I sympathize with the property owners, but I do think that Epic has gone above and beyond what was necessarily required. I'm a little bit shocked that Placer County wasn't more amenable to the idea of locating this pole or allowing it to be relocated to the Firestone, I refer to as the old Firestone property across the highway. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't have been more productive for the appellants to appeal to Placer County, their constituents of Placer counties. And to me, that would have been a more fruitful conversation than to continue to insist that the permittees look for alternative locations. So I don't know. The question is whether or not a pause would alter the ultimate outcome and whether or not Placer County would be amenable to reconsidering their decision not to entertain the idea of having the pole located on undeveloped property in a recreational area. You know, I have to push back a little bit on the allegation that somehow staff didn't did something that was in defiance or inconsistent with our rules. The rule with respect to notification does not require that all affected property owners be notified. It says affected property owners, and that I suppose is subject to a certain amount of interpretation. But I think staff, as they typically do, went above and beyond what was required, realizing that this was still a sensitive location, at least in the eyes of the people who live and use the recreational facilities in the Dollar Hill development. So could you, Mark, tell me why the county elected to reject the possibility of allowing the relocation of the pole to its property, to its recreational property?
So this outreach occurred quite a while ago, maybe, gosh, it's probably been close to 2 years ago. The original outreach was, you contact the county and you get shuffled around to different departments I was basically met with indifference in terms of we're just not interested. There wasn't any significant issues, as we dove into it a little further, there is a trail system over there. There's many reasons why you go on a particular site. The TRPA requirements is certainly key to that. So there is a trail system over there. I think Paul would be a better somebody to speak to that, but you can't locate directly next to a trail. I don't know what the proximity issue is. Ultimately, we just felt this was a better site. I mean, it's not, from our perspective, it provided enhanced coverage. Or utilizing existing infrastructure. It met with the similar goal of that we've utilized all in the entire basin, utilizing existing poles. That's been kind of the theme that TRPA and I've done work with Verizon in the past. So we've always tried to utilize existing poles, not add new poles, not add new site coverage, not, we're minimizing the impact on the environment by building on this site. This pole is clearly a better alternative.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mark, you indicated, or you showed images of, another AT&T owned pole. It's directly across the street from the proposed site. Is
I
that
think
right?
it's actually, yeah, right there.
That one?
Yeah.
And the appellants may want to clarify, is that the pole that they would prefer you to build on or replace?
When I met with the appellant, Lori, we're standing right in this position and we had this conversation and she threw that out as an idea. She had several questions as to other locations, but this was one, well, how about, would you consider this? So I'm not certain that this is, I don't want to speak for her. She can chime in there.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Lori,
Yeah, I'll go ahead and speak here. Yeah, we walked around that intersection to see if there was anything less obtrusive. Actually, there was a better location when it came to sightline, and that where the pink arrow is, if you follow along, you can barely see some white boxes. But those are the utility boxes that are tied to all this. And there is another pole back there, and it was tucked in the trees, and it seemed like a less visible site, but Mark was sharing that it would be too close to power lines. It was within 5 feet of a power line, and apparently you can't, you need to have more space if you have to ever get up into these towers and make changes, et cetera. So that was dismissed. And also, of course, it did bring it closer to another home. But, this intersection, there's homes in all 4 corners. And I know you guys mentioned that the concern was, like, for instance, across the street, you can't put it on a trail. Well, there's no homes over on the trail. But yet you can put it next to homes. And so it's not making much sense where these rules come in, and what is trying to be protected in the end. So we tried to work through this intersection. There's really no way to get away from homes here. I do think across the street with the new huge development being proposed makes far more sense. And I agree with, I'm sorry, being online, I can't see who's exactly talking in your name, but the first committee comment about how you sympathize with us and you agree that maybe our time should have been spent working with Placer County. And, we don't live up there full time, and we are doing our best as individuals to figure out your system of government and how it all works. And you're right, it would have been nice to have that conversation, but that is exactly what we're asking for today. Now that we're all on the same page, maybe we can get Placer County representation to the table, and maybe they will listen. And then maybe this could be solved for all of us.
Does the homeowner that's adjacent to that blue arrow want the cell tower on that on that pole?
I don't know personally. I don't know that person, so I suspect they probably would not.
I just wasn't sure if they were part of your group advocating. for
Oh,
this.
no, they're not. They're not part of our
Okay,
group.
thanks.
Anyone else?
Right, well, just as a comment, I really appreciate the staff report. It was just so clearly laid out and what all the issues were, and so thank you for that. And, yeah, these are challenging situations. There's never a perfect place for these, this infrastructure to go in, and, but I agree that, staff did an awesome job in terms of meeting all the requirements.
So can I ask one more question, Mark? So Mark, would a 30-day delay be enormously inconvenient for you?
We've been delayed already 6 months.
No, I
and
understand
I
that.
feel the appellants have had more than adequate time, and I've made myself available. I met with staff, with the appellant. I've spoken to her on the phone several times.
I'm not disputing that. I think you have. You've been very cooperative and very sympathetic, and I appreciate that. My question is, to me, the missing piece to this puzzle is Placer County. And because you have been conversing with the appellants and the appellants have been conversing with you to come up with an alternative location, you in turn have been conversing with Placer County as the applicant. But there hasn't been, to my knowledge, any meaningful conversation between the appellants and Placer County. And Placer County is beholding to them. They're residents in their county. And I think that would be a more productive line of communication if they were granted maybe a 30-day extension to have a meaningful conversation with the county to see if there is an alternative that would, that would be more appropriate for all parties concerned.
Those types of comments come up frequently in these meetings. They say, well, why didn't you pick this site? And of course, this site always has its own set of challenges and then creates another potential 2-year process at the new site. And then you fight that one, and then you have the next site. So it's not a clear cut, call Placer County, see if they'll do it, and we do it.
I understand that. I understand
Yeah.
that, Mark, but
Yeah,
I'm
I'm just being as
sure.
brutally honest as I can.
Listen, I understand that.
So-
I understand that, but I do think that because they are residents of Placer County, that, if they petitioned the county to give serious consideration to a location that wouldn't impact any homes, it wouldn't impact recreational facilities. I
But
mean,
wouldn't impact any homes. I'm not certain that I would agree with that. And I haven't done an analysis.
the Firestone property is an open recreational area.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't agree with Lori. I mean, the area where I think she's referring where the development is going is property that my family owns, an 11-acre site. And I believe that it's being considered for affordable housing development. So I don't think it's correct that it wouldn't have implications for the folks living in that development. But on the other hand, if you look at the Firestone property, I don't know what the acreage is, but it's quite expansive, and I just think that might be a better location for siting this pole.
I just worry about the new construction issue. That triggers for me, if we have existing facility here and we're talking to Placer about a new facility, that is a environmental road that I think changes the analysis sort of dramatically. And I do worry, one health and safety issue question I have is, even if we delay this 30 days, we're going into fire season, what's our 911 coverage up there? What's our actual cell calls to first responders? I mean, what safety issues are we facing right now in the community by not having adequate cell coverage? I imagine that's a thing.
Well, and
Absolutely.
so what's driving it, Mark? Tell me what's driving, who contacted Epic or AT&T to request a upgrading in the cell phone coverage in this area?
AT&T engineers analyze all the data that they are privy to, data that no one at this table is privy to, that they're looking to see how their network is functioning. It's their job to make sure the network functions as it should. And they've got extensive information with drop calls. Indoor coverage is woefully inadequate in this area. I've spoken to many residents in this neighborhood. I have friends and family in the neighborhood also, that express a keen opinion that the cell coverage here is very inadequate. And I always use the analogy of the umbrella. During the winter months, the umbrella is fully, out. You're getting pretty good coverage as you get more and more users in, and they're impacting that infrastructure. That umbrella closes in. It can take less capacity. We're exceeding capacity in this area. It's woefully underserved. There could be a potential where you could potentially try to make a 911 call and you could potentially not get out. It's getting serious.
Has staff received any letters of support for this project from first responders?
Catherine, you can check me, but I believe, not from first responders. We received a letter of support when the original project came to us in September from that guy, James Donahue, who I believe appellants maybe mentioned, like he's the president of the Dollar Point Association.
Right, but it's not first responder.
Yeah, it's not a first responder, but
Okay.
That's the only
Okay.
letter of support I can think of.
Okay.
Typically, the fire chiefs and so forth don't like to dive into the fray. The political, there's political implications and they typically don't like to get involved. That's been my experience in the past. Sometimes they'll show, I didn't in this case reach out to North Lake Fire. We have a facility, I did a facility at North Lake Fire Station with Verizon some years ago, and I tried to co-locate the AT&T equipment there. The networks are different, just because it works for Verizon doesn't mean that it'll work for AT&T. It wouldn't serve this area. So, we've dramatically scaled back this project and to make it as visually unimpactful as we can. With still keeping in mind that this is a communication facility. And so I'm very hopeful that we can continue on and get this thing done for you.
All right, thank you, Mark.
If there's no other committee questions or comments right now, we'll go to public comment on this item. If any
Can
member of
I,
the public-
as the appellant, am I allowed to make any more comments or do I need to wait?
Typically we don't, but I'll grant you a minute here.
Okay, thank you. As we're talking, we did look at the AT&T coverage map and it does show adequate coverage in the Dollar Point area. So I don't know if the urgency, which is being expressed here, is actually real at this time, at least in regards to giving all of us more time to find a better location. So yes, we agree. I have not heard a lot of complaints among fellow residents of spotty coverage. So I think that was a good question asked by the committee, I think it's committee chair, as to who requested it. I think AT&T wants to build out their infrastructure naturally, but it's not like it's urgent and we do have time to find a better location. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you're waiting to make a comment on this item, you can either dial *9 on your phone and you will be unmuted by Catherine, or you can please raise your hand at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Catherine, if you could help me out with public comment, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the public, if you would like to comment, please wait for me to call on you. And please raise your hand. There's a raise hand icon on the bottom of your screen. The first hand up I see is, the Zoom name is Christie's 16 Pro. Christy, please unmute and state your full name for the record. Go ahead and make your
Hi.
comment.
Hi, thanks so much for allowing me to comment. I really appreciate the TRPA's committee's openness to hearing our concerns. I and my husband and I own a house at 96 Toyabe Court, which is within the notification radius. It's not our primary. And so the notification from TRPA did go to our PO box, where we receive, our standard mail. And we did not get that notification in a timely manner prior to the first meeting that TRPA had on the project. Because we definitely would have, enjoyed being a part of that conversation. We were concerned when we were alerted to this situation. And I read through the documentation that, Epic provided to TRPA and that is on the public website. And, one thing that struck me was throughout the document, it talks about the fact that there's no visual impairment to the community. And I just have a very hard time understanding how anybody could actually perceive that. If you drive out to the site and you turn off Highway 28 into the Dollar Point area, where that cell tower is now, proposed to be located, is not screened by trees at all. It's in front of the trees that surround the community center. It's extremely, a much bigger visual impact, I think, than maybe anybody realizes. I mean, the pictures definitely help, but I think if anybody was to go out and drive into our main Dollar Point site, they would understand how visually impactful that pole is going to be. I was also surprised and somewhat concerned that James Donahue, who's the president of our, Dollar Point Association, personally sent a letter in, which seemed to me to indicate that the DPA was in support of this. I also understand that James Donahue has a relative who works for Epic Wireless, which is another concern, quite honestly, in terms of, his support and how this was communicated to the rest of the members of the Dollar Point community. There is a very large project that is set to go on across the street, the Dollar Creek proposed housing development, as well as the, very large area that was, the committee members mentioned, was owned by Placer County. And, we would be,
We've hit
we,
3 minutes. Would you like to finish your thought?
yeah, I just would request that we be given another 30 days to contact Placer County. I mean, this has just been, I don't feel like this has been fairly and adequately discussed with the
Thank you.
county.
The next hand raised is Dory Albert. Dory, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I just wanted to emphasize the safety element of where the placement of this pole is going. According to Todd Snyder, the pole could actually, if it fell, and that's something you have to think about, would enter the pool. So that's a very key issue. Secondly, I would also like to reemphasize the Placer County piece of it because we don't know what price was proposed and we weren't part of that meeting. So opening that up to Placer County and finding out more information there would be important. Also, I keep hearing about the importance of cell coverage in case of emergency. Well, I'm happen to be CERT trained, and I know that the first thing to go down are the cell towers. And so rescuers use a different mode of radio signal, not the cell tower. And if people are really concerned, the best thing to use is a landline. A Princess phone is the best. Again, aesthetically, everybody sees this pole entering Dollar Point. So you're affecting the entire community, not just a 300 foot radius. And there are, someone had said from the TRPA that we try not to put these poles next to houses. They are houses surrounding the area. The other piece of it is the canopy of trees that are surrounding, which is supposed to be a good thing. Evidently, it causes an obstruction so that you don't have the coverage that you're planning on. We're not supposed to talk about health of people, but the health of the trees. If you look at an NIH study, the trees are affected. So what happens to those trees that are around it? Do we lose the trees? So I would recommend an environmental impact report looking at the placement. Thirdly, I just question the location, is if it's going to be great. And the other piece of it is Dollar Point, most people do have secondary homes there, so that the need is mostly during the summer. So I would look at the entire year as far as what is actually needed year round versus just in the summertime, because then you get different metrics as far as cell coverage needs and all that kind of stuff. And again, with looking at the Placer County across the street, I think I've covered. Oh, also the other question I want to know, TRPA mentioned a scenic threshold, and I would like to know what that means. And also I'd like to know with the AT&T pole that is being, that is owned by AT&T, what happens next once it gets that cell tower? What else is it allowed to do after it gets the cell tower? Can it add even more carriers to it, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you. And the last hand raised is Alan Miller. Alan, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi, I'm Alan Miller. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I submitted I'm a civil and environmental engineer here in Lake Tahoe the last 30 some years. And I submitted my comments in writing for the record. I, would like to say that, I think this whole proceeding is a travesty. It's illegal from the get-go. The approval was illegal. The EA was deficient. You need to do an EIS on this project under your requirements under the compact. And your environmental review process is so deficient that you deserve to be sued at every turn until you change that, because you're not doing anything that you're supposed to do. And you're just sitting in ticking these boxes off, saying no impact, no impact, no impact. We got our little checklist. Well, you're required to analyze alternatives to the project, not to the project site. An EIS would evaluate alternatives that might include non-wireless solutions, that might include not only alternative sites, but alternative technologies. There's so much that is undone here. You really need to do an EIS. It's just another tower, no cumulative effects, no fire analysis. The public safety findings are just BS. I mean, it's just so ridiculous what you people do. So I really, that's why I set you up for a lawsuit, because you're just going to keep doing this idiotic stuff until somebody stops you. And, the only thing I'll give you is I was glad to see on this project, at least TRPA changed its policy to stop putting the plastic needles on these towers. Just one more insult to add to injury. So I'm glad to see that. I don't know where that policy is published or written or how it was developed, but it's an improvement. So at least we don't have to deal with the microplastics from these industrial towers. But again, you're just out to lunch on your whole environmental impact assessment program. And I had no sympathy for you, a bunch of frauds. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have one more hand go up. Mark, if you could give us your last name for the record and go ahead and make your comment.
Hi, my name is Mark Berwick. I'm a resident of 165 Observation Drive. I'm within the 300-foot radius prescribed notice area. I've also submitted comments in writing. I support the appellant's request for additional 30 days to review the site and have further discussions in partnership with the parties on this conference. I think it would be beneficial to the community, and for a number of reasons have already been stated, so I won't waste anyone else's time on this, but appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak.
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised.
Thank you.
Did staff hear anything that they wanted to respond to? And then I'll do one more round of committee comments if they have it.
Yeah, I could make a few comments here in response to the discussion and just the comments. You know, I wanted to say, as listening to this hearing today, you know, for the committee to think about, for the board, you know, the basis for granting a permit, also the basis for granting an appeal or denying a permit, you know, you have to have some stuff on the record. You have to have some basis for doing that. And I just would caution that the fact that there could theoretically be some other site out there owned by somebody else. I caution a little bit on that of being a substantial basis to grant an appeal here. I think that there's, you know, as Mark and probably everybody, Haley, you're kind of kicking a project, a permittee over to somebody else. That's not really what staff does. That's not what the hearings officer does when we get approvals. We don't, you know, think, well, we look at the project that's proposed. We don't think about maybe there's this other place, and so let's deny it because maybe there's somewhere else it could go. That's not usually how that works. So I just would caution a bit on that. The 30-day, you know, the point about the 30 days and asking for 30 days more. A little response to that is, you know, just to remember this was appealed last fall. And so we've had what, over 6 months.
Yeah.
And I know I spoke with Ms. Brooke, I spoke with Mark. There has been a process, there has been an effort to talk about these other options, and we've been doing that. It just didn't pop up into this appeal today, you know, and so I think that those efforts weren't fruitful. They're asking for 30 days more. I don't quite know, you know, what that would do. And then just somebody asked about the scenic thresholds. And I want to respond a little to that. You know, visual impacts to a community or to private residences we've covered before. Those aren't really, those aren't TRPA standards or impacts that are the focus point of TRPA. The scenic thresholds for TRPA are visual impacts from the highway corridors. So that would be in this case, Highway 28, and also looking in from Lake Tahoe in toward the shore. Those are the scenic thresholds that matter most to TRPA that we look at. It's the special use findings here require to look at neighborhood compatibility, but a lot of the visual impacts, you know, to the specific neighborhood, those really aren't the scenic thresholds that that TRPA is really concerned with in permitting projects like this. So those were my comments and responses.
Quick question, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that. Graham, I do think that we have a bit of discretion here that we can exercise. And I'm going to repeat my prior statement that I think staff did a stellar job. I mean, everything that you're recommending is in compliance, and in my estimations, compliance with our code. I do want to say, however, that we may want to look at our rule as it applies to the 14 days of advanced public notice. The U.S. Postal Service has become extraordinarily inefficient. It's $10 billion in debt. There are likely to be additional cuts. Every piece of mail that is mailed from at least from, I believe, from the entire Tahoe Basin goes to Reno for sorting. It is not sorted locally. Then it has to find its way back to the recipients. And so I would like to suggest that we take a serious look at amending our rules of procedure as it applies to that 14-day rule, because I don't think it's realistic.
Yeah, I understand your concern. I would just, again, as I mentioned, in the presentation, pretty much across the board legally,
You're right.
you know, the rule is,
Jack,
notice is given when it dropped in the mailbox.
Not contesting that. I'm not contesting that. And in fact, with respect to the fact that we're not using, the sort of shielding we used to use for these antennas, I mean, the monopoles with the artificial tree limbs that are degrading and causing a problem with respect to the proliferation of microplastics. I wish that had been, I wish as a governing board member, I'd been advised of that. I know it was a serious issue in the minds of many people, but that was a huge step forward, and I appreciate that. And even if the committee elects to forward this onto the board with a negative recommendation on the appeal, I would really encourage Mark and his clients to work with the appellants to select the appropriate route. I mean, they're the ones who are ultimately going to be impacted. So rather than working with staff, I think involving them at least to that extent would be appropriate.
Is that wrap hopefully not made of plastic that
It
degrades?
said there, no plastic.
Alright, yeah.
It's a decal. I would think that there may be some plastic in it, but the point is, it's not the needle, they aren't needles that can detach and make their way in. So it's,
Yeah,
it's that's about as good a description. I don't know the exact.
I think I echo Shelley then to work with appellants and see if there's anything out there about that wrap degrading. I don't know anything about cell phone tower wraps, but
Otherwise, you can use a petroleum product like paint.
let's,
That's true.
let's not
They can
create
be
one
painted.
problem.
They can be painted.
Yeah,
That is an
okay.
option.
So let's talk to let's work together with paint or something. Let's not create one problem trying to solve another with a wrap that might come off.
Yeah, the wrap's not going to come off.
Okay.
It does not come off.
Okay.
So I'll go on record and say, that's not going to happen.
It can degrade though, Mark, right?
It could degrade, I guess, in some form or another over time, everything degrades, everything.
Right.
So, I just want to make a point here that I sent out all of this mitigation materials that were presented to you have been in the appellate's hands for, I don't know the exact timeline, but many months. And I called and had one conversation with the appellant. Actually had follow-up calls, didn't get return phone calls and emails and no response. So I have tried my level best to outreach and do everything possible. We don't cite these by committee, that's just not how it works. The process, we don't say, hey, everyone in the world, how about this site? I don't mean to be sarcastic, but literally, it doesn't work like that. We have to pick a site that works and then we go with it.
I will look for a motion here, but I do want to say just on that point, it does sound like our homeowners involved here have been incredibly nice, for lack of a better word. Thank you for engaging in the process and for being thoughtful and kind, and thank you. I don't want this to be a communication breakdown.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your outreach. Please keep doing it. Thank you to our homeowners for showing up in such a respectful way this morning and a thoughtful way. I think that is becoming more rare and I appreciate it. So I just want to say that out loud and always to my committee, but we don't see that all the time and it's really appreciated. So with that, I will look for a motion from a committee member.
The motion in the staff report.
Doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, okay.
This one isn't the backwards one. This one is just a motion to recommend denial of appeal, if that's what you want to make.
Yeah, no, I would make a motion to affirm the executive director's decision, deny the appeal. I think from a legal standpoint, they haven't met a threshold to grant it.
Thank you. Any further discussion, or I will look for a roll call vote?
Ms. Falstinos,
Yes.
Ms. Loomer,
Yes.
Ms. Aldine,
No,
Ms. Keycapper,
Yes.
Mr. Keycapper, excuse me, and Ms. Williamson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, that motion passes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's move on then to agenda item 4. If we have an agenda item 4, do we have anything we need to discuss in a closed session?
We don't.
Cool. Let's move on then. So we don't need agenda item 4 or 5. We don't have any direction. Agenda item 6, which is committee member comments. Any comments from our committee? Great, and that takes us to our final matter of business, which is our general public interest comment period. Any member of the public wishing to address the legal committee on any item listed or not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Individuals or groups who have already commented on items listed on the agenda are not permitted to comment on that same topic. The legal committee is prohibited by law from taking immediate action or discussing issues raised in this public comment period. Finally, comments must relate to matters within the jurisdiction of the agency. With those parameters, please either dial *9 or click your raise hand button on Zoom to be called on for our final public comment period.
We have one hand raised so far. Larry Lapkin, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi, good morning. I live at Dollar Point. I'm at 3295 Edgewater Drive. I also visit the pool on a regular basis. I am a full-time resident. And I don't know, I kind of joined the meeting a little late, but aside from the visual impact that everybody's been talking about, I think the bigger issue here is the basically the proximity of the proposed site to the pool because of increased exposure, basically EMFs. It's a well-known fact that there is an increased exposure for children. They're more vulnerable to potential health risks from EMFs due to their developing bodies and thinner skulls. Have you guys addressed this issue? I mean, this is the biggest issue here. It's aside from the visual impact. I don't know that you guys have really thought out the long-term health effects of putting this tower where you want to put it. It's ridiculous to me. The fact that it's right next to a swimming pool where you've got children and adults, the increased levels of EMFs is nobody really knows yet what that is. And this is if you allow this to happen, you're going to be potentially creating a massive health issue that will be ongoing for years and years. You won't even know what the impact of this is going to be until much later. So I have to agree with the gentleman, the engineer that spoke earlier. I never got a notice about this before as well. So I'm in favor of turning it back to Placer County. And I'm just amazed that you guys are so, I'm not going to say ignorant, but I'm going to say that you haven't really thought this through. You're thinking about the wrong things. You're trying to slam it through without really thinking about the whole process. So I thought I saw something about, is anybody talking about the health impacts of this? I mean, it's just unbelievable to me that you would even allow this to happen. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
There are no other members to comment.
Okay, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okey doke.